Hi, this is Wayne White, entomologist at American Pest, and I'm in an attic today, and we're going to do a little wildlife exclusion. The story here is that there was an animal tromping around in the attic space. Upon inspection, we saw some paw prints of a raccoon, and up here in this louver, this ventilation louver, we see this opening in the screen, where the screen has been torn open, and I think that is where a raccoon may have accessed this attic. Also, the other piece of evidence that I can see is a few hairs on these upright tubophores, which would indicate that this was an area that the raccoon had been using to come and go from this opening. So what we're going to do here is we're going to remove the screen that's here. We're going to, this is a fine screen that prevents insect entry. We're going to cut a new piece of this screen and put that back in place. And then finally we are going to take a piece of hardware cloth and secure that over the screen to be able to prevent the entry of another animal like a squirrel or a raccoon. A few tips here about safety when you're working in an area like this. It's often important to have a bump cap on. One of the things that you notice is that nails that secure the roofing into the sheathing here often stick through. So with a bump cap, you're much less likely to stick your head with a nail. Another thing that's important to have is some heavy-duty gloves, particularly when you're working with hardware cloth. It can be very sharp and cut and scratch and that sort of thing. And finally, maybe one of the most important things is safety goggles. Anytime you're using staples, any kind of hammering, any kind of sawing, any kind of work where you're creating little bits of material, it's important to wear safety goggles. Another thing that's really difficult in a situation like this is that this attic has no floor. You have to be able to stand only on the rafters or the ceiling joists that are there. Otherwise, you'll fall right through to the level below, and that would not be good. So we've cut our insect screen to go over the opening, and I'm going to staple it in place here. It's important that we cut it carefully and stretch it tightly so that no insects can get in and around it. Stink bugs, particularly this time of the year, are one of the pests that are entering homes. So it's important that we make it as tightly sealed as possible. So I'm just going to staple it tightly around the edges. And the next thing we're going to do is install the hardware cloth. So now we've got our piece of hardware cloth cut and fit carefully, and now it's just a matter of stapling it in place. You want to staple it so an animal like a raccoon or squirrel that might try to get in again doesn't have any part of a little opening to tug on. Particularly raccoons, they can really pull hard on something, so you want to make sure it's all stapled very carefully and tightly. So to summarize what we've done here today, we had an attic where we had an opening, a ventilation louver that had window screening in it that had been torn open by an animal. There was some evidence that an animal had entered the attic. What we decided to do was to replace the window screening with new screening and seal it tightly to prevent the entry of any insects that might try to spend the winter in the attic, like stink bugs, which are really a big deal here in the Mid-Atlantic area. And then finally we used hardware cloth, very heavy galvanized hardware cloth, and secured that in place to prevent larger animals, squirrels and raccoons, from being able to access the attic again.